The distant planet was a barren wasteland, covered with red sand and jagged rocks. The soldiers had been stationed here for weeks, waiting for a mission that never seemed to come. The sun was scorching, and the air felt thick with the heat. The men of the human squad were beginning to grow restless, unsure of why they had been sent to this forsaken place. Suddenly, a loud hum filled the air, cutting through the stillness like a blade. The soldiers quickly grabbed their weapons, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. They had been briefed about the possibility of an alien threat, but no one expected this. As they looked up, a strange craft descended from the sky, its sleek, silver body shimmering under the harsh light of the sun. It landed silently, kicking up a cloud of dust and sand. The craft's hatch opened, and 3 figures stepped out. They were unlike anything the soldiers had ever seen. Tall, slender, and dressed in tight, black suits that gleamed like polished metal. Their faces were smooth and alien, with large, dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to expect next. The alien leader, her voice cool and calm, addressed the humans. "We have come to assist you," she said. "You are not alone in this fight, humans." The soldiers were confused, their minds racing as they tried to comprehend her words. What was this about? Why had these beings come to them now? They were here to fight, but who were they fighting against? The alien nurses began to move forward, their movements graceful and fluid. They were beautiful, with an air of authority that seemed to command respect from the soldiers. The soldiers couldn't help but feel both uneasy and intrigued. These aliens weren't here to harm them. They were here to help. But help with what? As the nurses approached, the soldiers began to notice something strange. The nurses were carrying equipment, tools they hadn't seen before. What were these devices? And why had they been sent to support a team of humans in the middle of nowhere? The questions piled up, but none of the soldiers dared to ask. They could only wait for the next command, unsure of what the next few hours would bring. The air was thick with tension as the soldiers stood at attention. Whatever was about to happen, they knew it was going to change everything. This wasn't just a routine mission. This was something much bigger, and the soldiers had no idea just how big it would get. The soldiers stood in silence, watching the alien nurses as they set up their equipment. The sleek metallic tools looked advanced, almost otherworldly. The nurses worked with efficiency and precision, moving in perfect synchrony. Each nurse seemed to have a specific task, and they executed it without hesitation. The humans could only stare in awe, unsure of how to react to this unexpected arrival. Leader of the nurses, a tall figure with silver skin, approached the commanding officer of the human squad. She had an air of authority about her that demanded attention. "We are here to assist with the wounded," she explained. "We have the technology to help your soldiers recover, but we will need your cooperation." The officer nodded, though he was still confused. He had expected to fight, to defend the planet, not to heal the wounded. "What is this? Why are you here?" he asked. The alien nurse's expression remained calm, almost serene. "The war you face is not just yours. It is the beginning of something much larger." She paused, her dark eyes scanning the soldiers. "We have been observing the situation from afar. We know what you are up against, and we have come to help you prepare for what lies ahead." The words hung in the air, and the tension among the soldiers grew. What was this larger war she was speaking of? Why had these aliens chosen now to intervene? Before anyone could ask another question, the nurses began their work. One by one, they approached the soldiers, scanning them with strange devices. The soldiers tensed, unsure of what the devices were capable of. They had never seen technology like this, and it made them uneasy. The alien nurses moved swiftly, using their tools to scan and assess the health of each soldier. It became clear that their work was not just about healing. There was a purpose to their actions that the humans couldn't quite understand. As the nurses continued their work, the soldiers grew increasingly curious. What were they preparing for? Why were these aliens so certain that they needed help? The humans couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was on the horizon, something they were not yet prepared for. The commanding officer walked up to the alien leader, his expression stern. "Tell us more. What is this war that you are speaking of?" The alien nurse looked at him with a calm intensity. "You will see soon enough. The enemy is far more dangerous than you could imagine. But for now, focus on your soldiers. They need to be at their best." As she spoke, the soldiers felt a strange sense of calm wash over them. They knew something big was coming, and yet they couldn't bring themselves to fear it. They were soldiers, after all, and they were trained to fight. But the question remained, were they ready for what was coming? The sky above the distant planet remained eerily silent, as if waiting for the inevitable. The soldiers could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. They were no longer just defending a planet. They were preparing for a war that would change everything. And the alien nurses, though strangers in every sense of the word, were their only hope of survival. The soldiers stood in uneasy silence as the alien nurses worked tirelessly. The air felt thick with anticipation, and each soldier could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. No one spoke. The quiet was almost suffocating. The alien nurses moved with precision, their every action calculated and purposeful. They were a strange sight to the humans, but there was no denying their efficiency. The commanding officer paced back and forth, his mind racing. What were these aliens preparing them for? What did they know that the humans didn't? He glanced at the nurses who were still at work, scanning and treating the wounded. They had been nothing but helpful. But that didn't answer the question on everyone's mind. What was this larger war they had mentioned? The alien leader turned to face him, sensing his frustration. "We have been observing the situation for some time. The enemy you face is far more advanced than you realize. You have been fighting a small part of the larger conflict, but there are greater forces at play, forces you are not yet prepared for." The officer took a deep breath. "And you think your technology will make us ready?" The alien nurse nodded calmly. "It will give you a fighting chance. But there is more to it than just technology. You must be mentally prepared for the battle ahead. We are here to help you train, to prepare your minds and bodies for what is to come. This war is not just about weapons. It is about strategy, survival, and unity." The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. They had always been trained for physical battles, for the immediate threats. But this was different. The threat the aliens spoke of was something unknown, something they couldn't see or touch. And yet, the more they listened to the alien nurses, the more they realized that this was not a fight they could win with brute force alone. The alien leader gestured for the soldiers to gather around. "We will begin the training now. The enemy you will face is not human. They are a species with abilities beyond anything you have encountered. They can manipulate the very fabric of reality. They will test your strength, your resolve, and your mind." The soldiers looked at each other, their faces filled with confusion and fear. Reality manipulation? They had been trained to fight aliens, but this was something entirely different. How could they fight an enemy that could twist the very world around them? The alien nurse saw the doubt in their eyes and stepped forward. "We will teach you how to fight back, but it will not be easy. You will be tested like never before. Are you ready for this?" There was a long pause, the soldiers still uncertain, but something in their gut told them they had no choice. They had come this far, and backing down wasn't an option. The commanding officer nodded, his voice firm. "We are ready, whatever this enemy is, we will face it head on." The alien leader smiled, the expression almost imperceptible. "Very well. Prepare yourselves. The training starts now." The soldiers lined up, ready to begin the unknown training the aliens had promised. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they knew that they had no other choice. The battle for survival had begun. And there was no turning back now. Asterisk, the training began immediately. The soldiers gathered in a large, open area where the alien nurses set up a series of strange devices. They looked like holographic projectors, emitting a soft glowing light. As the soldiers lined up, the nurses began their work, activating the devices one by one. The first test was a mental challenge. The soldiers were instructed to focus on the glowing light, to clear their minds and concentrate. At first, it seemed simple, but as the light pulsed, the soldiers felt their thoughts being pulled in every direction. The alien leader stood in front, watching them closely. This is just the beginning. You must learn to control your mind. Only then can you control your actions in battle. The soldiers struggled, some falling to their knees, their minds overwhelmed by the powerful sensations. The alien nurses observed without comment, their eyes tracking each soldier's progress. The commanding officer was the first to regain control, his breath steady as he focused. Slowly, he rose to his feet, eyes locked on the glowing light. It took time, but one by one, the soldiers began to calm themselves. Pushing through the mental resistance, they felt a strange sense of unity, as if their minds were connected by an invisible thread. This was not just training. This was a transformation. As the soldiers grew more accustomed to the mental exercises, the alien nurses introduced physical challenges. Strange machines whirred to life, projecting holographic enemies that moved and attacked with startling speed. The soldiers were thrown into combat scenarios, fighting against the projections that mimicked alien soldiers. At first, the soldiers struggled, their movements awkward and uncoordinated. They were not used to the pace of these enemies, nor the strange combat styles they employed. The alien leader watched with interest, nodding in approval as the soldiers slowly adapted. You must learn to move faster than your opponent. Your strength is not enough. It is your speed, your strategy, and your adaptability that will win the war. The soldiers pushed themselves harder, their bodies aching as they practiced against the holographic enemies. They moved in unison, learning to predict the enemy's attacks and counter them. It wasn't easy, but the more they trained, the more they felt themselves improving. Hours passed, and the soldiers began to feel the toll of the training. Sweat soaked their clothes, and their muscles screamed in protest. But they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to stop. As the sun began to set, the alien nurses called for a break. The soldiers collapsed to the ground, exhausted but determined. The alien leader approached the commanding officer, her voice soft but firm. You have made good progress, but there's more to be done. Your soldiers must be prepared for the real enemy. The officer nodded, his eyes tired but resolute. We will be ready, whatever comes next. We'll face it together. The alien leader smiled, an expression that seemed almost approving. Good, you have learned the first lesson. The war you fight is not just physical. It is a battle of the mind, the body, and the spirit. The soldiers stood ready to continue. They were no longer just humans. They were something more, something stronger, and they were ready for whatever came next. The following day, the soldiers were once again gathered for training. The alien nurses stood in a circle, each one holding a different device. The air was thick with anticipation, as the soldiers knew that today would be the final test. Alien leader stood in front of them, her expression unreadable. Today, you will face the ultimate challenge. You will fight against an enemy that does not exist. The battle will be in your minds. The soldiers looked at each other, unsure of what this meant. What kind of battle could be fought inside their minds? The alien leader continued, this is the final phase of your training. If you succeed, you will be ready for anything that comes your way. With a command, the alien nurses activated the devices. The holographic projectors hummed to life, and the soldiers were plunged into a world that was not their own. They were no longer standing on the barren planet. They were in a vast dark void. The air was thick with an oppressive silence. and a strange fog seemed to swallow everything around them. The soldiers could hear their own breathing, but nothing else. Then, without warning, the enemy appeared. Shadowy figures, humanoid in shape, but with eyes that glowed like fire. They advanced, moving in eerie silence. The soldiers could feel their hearts pounding in their chests. The fear was palpable. The commanding officer's mind raced. This was not a physical enemy. This was a mental one. The soldiers had to rely on their training to stay calm. They had to trust in the alien nurse's guidance. One by one, the soldiers engaged the shadowy figures. But as they did, something strange happened. The enemy began to mimic their movements. For every strike the soldiers made, the enemy mirrored it. The soldiers found themselves locked in a battle of wills, as their every move was countered by an identical one. The alien leader watched the scene with quiet interest. She knew that this test would be the true measure of the soldiers' readiness. It was not enough to be physically strong or fast. They had to outsmart the enemy. To break free from the cycle of mimicry, the commanding officer stepped forward, his voice steady. "Focus, men. This is not a fight of strength. It is a fight of strategy." Slowly, the soldiers began to understand. They stopped trying to overpower the enemy and instead focused on disrupting the pattern by changing their movements. By being unpredictable, they began to break the cycle. As the soldiers adapted, the shadowy figures grew weaker. Their movements became more erratic, less synchronized. The soldiers pressed on, pushing through the mental barrier. Each victory over the enemy made them stronger. Finally, the last of the shadowy figures vanished. The soldiers stood in the dark void, breathing heavily but victorious. The alien nurses deactivated the projectors, and the world around them faded away. They were back on the barren planet, surrounded by the alien nurses and the officer. The alien leader nodded approvingly. "You have passed the test. You are ready for the war that is coming. But remember, this was only the beginning. You have learned how to fight, but now you must learn how to survive." The soldiers looked at each other, their expressions filled with determination. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. They were no longer just soldiers. They were warriors, trained and ready. And as the sun began to set on the distant planet, they knew that the true battle was about to begin. Asterisk. The soldiers stood in formation, their bodies weary but their spirits high. The alien leader had just informed them that the time for preparation was over. The true war was about to begin. The sun had set, casting a deep red hue across the barren planet. In the distance, the sound of engines could be heard, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. The alien nurses stood ready, their faces calm, but their eyes filled with an unspoken understanding. They knew that the real battle was coming. They had prepared the soldiers for this moment. But there was no telling how the human warriors would respond to the overwhelming force they would face. The commanding officer addressed his men, his voice steady. "This is it. We've trained for this day, and now we face the unknown. We may not know what comes next, but we know how to fight. And that's all that matters." The soldiers nodded, their resolve firm. They had been through the mental and physical challenges, and they were ready to put everything they had learned to the test. They were no longer the same soldiers who had landed on this planet weeks ago. They were a team, united by their struggle, and they would face whatever came next together. The first wave of enemy ships appeared on the horizon. They were massive, dark vessels moving with precision and speed. The soldiers could feel the tension rise in the air. The enemy was here, and there was no turning back. The alien leader's voice echoed in their minds. "Focus on the mission. Hold your ground. The enemy will come in waves. You must survive." The soldiers took their positions, each one ready to face whatever would come. The alien nurses had equipped them with new weapons, sleek energy rifles that hummed with power. The soldiers knew that these weapons, though strange, were their best chance against the overwhelming force of the enemy. As the first ships landed, the ground shook with the impact. The soldiers raised their rifles, aiming at the advancing alien forces. They were not human. They were something else entirely. Tall, insectoid creatures with armored exoskeletons and glowing eyes. They moved with terrifying speed, charging toward the human soldiers with deadly intent. The first shots were fired, and the battlefield erupted. In chaos, the soldiers fired in unison, their energy weapons lighting up the night. The enemy was relentless, but the humans fought with everything they had. They had been trained for this, and they would not back down. For hours the battle raged. On, the soldiers fought with skill and determination. Using the strategies they had learned from the alien nurses, they fought in squads, covering each other's backs, communicating with precision. They were a force to be reckoned with, but the enemy seemed endless. Wave after wave of the insectoid creatures charged at the humans, their numbers overwhelming. The soldiers fought bravely, but they could feel the exhaustion setting in. They had been fighting for hours, with no sign of relief. Just as hope seemed to fade, the alien leaders' voice rang out in their minds again. This is not your fight alone. You have the power to change the tide of battle. Focus on the energy around you. Use what you've learned. Survive. The soldiers took a deep breath, remembering the lessons they had learned during their training. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about adapting. They focused their minds, pushing past the physical exhaustion. They tapped into the power they had been taught to harness, with a newfound sense of purpose. The soldiers launched a counterattack. They fought not just with weapons, but with their minds. The battle shifted in their favor as they used their strategies and mental strength to outmaneuver the enemy. The insectoid creatures faltered, and the humans gained ground. In the end, the soldiers stood victorious. Though battered and exhausted, the enemy had been pushed back. But the war was far from over. The alien leader approached the commanding officer, her expression unreadable. You have done well, but this is only the beginning. There's much more to come. The soldiers, though exhausted, stood tall. They had proven their strength and resilience. They had learned the lessons of war and survival. And now, they were ready for whatever came next.